David Tawil is co-founder of Prochain Capital, a multi-strategy crypto asset fund covering the entire ecosystem of the burgeoning asset class. His deep experience in crypto assets, token mining, venture capital, programming, and asset management. There it is. David, I brought you onto the show because the U.S. government under Donald Trump has made the plunge into crypto, made a significant plunge into crypto. Now, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that the government is buying crypto. Apparently, there were criminal cases, prosecutions, where they were able to seize crypto assets, and it's those assets that we are effectively holding onto. Something about stablecoin, Bitcoin, but I want you to go into it and explain it to the audience because you will do a much better job of explaining it than I would. What is this plunge that I'm understanding that the government is getting involved into crypto? Give the audience a brief summary of what's happening, and we can step into it from there.
Sure. So let's start with what the government already owns, which you alluded to. So we don't get, as citizens, full transparency on everything that the government has in terms of seizures. We don't get an inventory. We don't know how many cars they've repossessed. We don't know how many bank accounts they've frozen and how many billions are in those accounts. I'm sure, with respect to all sorts of governments that we don't agree with, against which there are, actions or, with respect to crimes that have been prosecuted, lots of assets have been seized. However, this is important. However, when it comes to cryptocurrency, it's not that the US government needs to go ahead and divulge that information to us because cryptocurrency is so transparent. Everybody knows the US government's wallet address and therefore knows how much the US government holds. And so the government, as you alluded to, owns a bunch of cryptocurrencies. The overwhelming majority, into the tens of billions of dollars, multiples, is Bitcoin, which is great because Bitcoin is the most valuable cryptocurrency. It's the simplest cryptocurrency in the sense of understanding what it does, effectively nothing. It just stores value. And it is a stateless asset. So think of it as, I don't know, digital property, digital gold, whatever you want to go ahead and, whatever moniker you want to go ahead and apply to it. Essentially, it is a technology that is scarce. People have already ascribed value to it, and it has no attachment to any particular government. And so therefore, it is not affected by the financial status of any particular government. And that's very important, right? The US dollar strengthens and weakens depending on the financial status of the US government. Now, we don't think much about our status. It's pretty strong. But if you're in a secondary or tertiary or frontier market, tertiary country or frontier market, your currency being strong is certainly not a foregone conclusion. And so therefore, instead of keeping your money in your local Argentine peso, you may prefer to keep it, as a matter of fact, in something that has value and stability. So that, all that being said, we have now, pursuant to executive orders, and this is very important as well, it is not done pursuant, it hasn't been done pursuant to legislative passing of a law. It has been done by executive order, which means that it could get reversed by the next executive. Donald Trump has created two things. First, a Bitcoin strategic reserve that has initially been funded by or populated by the existing Bitcoin that the US government owns, or in other words, we are not going to be sellers. The United States will not be sellers of that Bitcoin. And in addition, he's given his cabinet the charge to go ahead and buy additional Bitcoin as long as it doesn't come at a cost to taxpayers.
Wait, what does that mean? How does the government?
I'll give you an example.
Explain that.
That's what everyone has been speculating about. Well, how does it not come at a cost to taxpayers?
Right.
Let's say the government already owns other assets. Instead of keeping the value in those assets, like the gold in Fort Knox or some other assets that we hold, maybe our oil reserves as well. We have a strategic oil reserve. It could be anything, right? We can talk about the merits of what we should sell and what we should put into Bitcoin and so on. I mean, I believe, frankly, the likelihood over the long term that Bitcoin is going to appreciate by multiples is much greater than the likelihood that gold is going to appreciate by multiples. If you look at the price of gold over the last 10 years, it has not nearly kept pace with the gains in Bitcoin. Now, you and I may disagree on that.
I know, but
Let's
gold is but oil, gold, those are
no
tangible objects. Bitcoin
wait.
is not.
That you and I need to agree before we start the conversation that Bitcoin has value. If
Oh,
you're
I'm not saying it doesn't have value. I didn't
so
say
the
that.
fact that it's an intangible asset that should not be something that is a challenge, right? It's a technology.
I know, but assume for the moment
Yeah.
that something happens where the electronic system goes down. It goes away.
No. So
It
so
doesn't go away.
it does
You're
it
saying
does
it's
not.
still.
No, it's on a distributed ledger, meaning it is not centralized in one place. Unlike the golden Fort Knox, which if stolen is gone, right?
Who's stealing the gold from Fort Knox?
I don't know, some very crafty criminal. In
I
in in contrast, it's not as if the US's Bitcoin sits on a thumb drive or a computer. It exists out on the blockchain. And so it can't be stolen in that way. So as a matter of fact, I have one up on you right now.
But you don't, because gold is a real thing, oil is a real thing, Bitcoin is an ephemeral thing that we just give value to. And look, and we can have this conversation about whether gold has value and perception and how values are. I'm just putting out that there's a difference between a physical object and the usage of a physical object. Meaning, I can use oil, I can use gold. Even if the entire world falls apart, I can still use oil, I can still use gold.
I
Bitcoin
agree
goes.
with oil. I agree that oil has tremendous utility. The majority of gold's value is not because people make jewelry out of it. It's not. It's really because people store their value in it.
Right.
Right. And so I'm saying to you, you're right. Bitcoin has some usage. You could actually go to El Salvador and buy things in Bitcoin. There is a pub in New York City that accepts Bitcoin. Okay, so there's some, but that's really on the fringes. The large majority, like gold, the large majority of Bitcoin's value is the fact that people store their money, their value
In Bitcoin.
in it. Okay.
Right.
And for guys like you and I who have, grayish beards, mine more gray than yours, this is revolutionary
Yeah.
for people not in our peer group, much younger than us. Um, they think gold is for old people. They're storing their value in Bitcoin. They
That I agree
are
with you.
they are technologically native people.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, for them, it makes a lot of sense. It's just a matter of time, frankly. I mean, I don't mean to bring tears to the eyes of those people that love gold, but it's just a matter of time because of a generational shift that everybody, the majority of people, are going to go ahead and store their value in technology or in Bitcoin or blockchain, crypto, as opposed to storing it in gold, silver, palladium, those things.
Metals.
It's
Yeah.
just not gonna be anymore.
Tell me, what does it mean that the government is involved in this? Is it stabilizing the value of Bitcoin? Is it, I would imagine people who are into this are super excited that the government has invested a stake in this. What does it
Well,
mean for it?
so so there's actually two aspects that people should think about. The first aspect is that the greatest superpower in the world believes that it should have some allocation to this, which will immediately spring to the minds of all the other nations of the world. Well, if the United States is doing this, should we be doing this also? Right? And so obviously we're talking about an asset that's scarce. right? Similar to gold, that yes, there's mining of it, but let's go ahead and say gold is somewhat scarce. So immediately you've got a limited supply, you've got rising demand, and so therefore, price should go up. So yes, people that own Bitcoin are excited about this. But there's a more fundamental issue here. The issue is the following. Why does the US government own gold? Why? Why? Because you and I both agree, for as long as we can remember, gold is a place to store value where in times of difficulty, right? If we had a recession or a depression in this country, people would run to assets like that. And so
Right.
therefore, yes, it is good to have some money, some value stored in something that is not tied to the fortunes of the US government, right? We should own some stuff like that. Everybody should own some impenetrable asset value. And so, from that perspective, it's a very important thing. It goes ahead and helps United States investors and citizens, as citizens, we are investors in the United States, have some comfort that everything that we've got going on here in the United States is not necessarily subject to the fluctuations of the US dollar. We actually have some value elsewhere. And for the United States overall, I actually believe, in stark contrast to a lot of the arguments that have been made by the left side of our government, in stark contrast, Bitcoin will never replace the US dollar. No one should get concerned about that. To the contrary, when other governments around the world understand that Bitcoin is a more stable asset than their own currency, there's likelihood that those governments will no longer print their own currencies anymore. I'm not talking about next year or 2 years from now. I'm talking about a considerable time in the future. They'll realize, what's the point of printing our own currency? We now have a currency that is not ours. It's nobody's, frankly. It's everybody's and nobody's all at the same time. Why don't we go ahead and adopt that as our standard in terms of currency? Right? Why don't we adopt Bitcoin? Wait, let me finish the thought. And with that, the United States dollar will become even stronger because Bitcoin will always be quoted in the United States in terms of its dollar equivalent price. We'll never quote the French franc equivalent price, right? We'll never
Right.
quote it here in the Argentinian peso equivalent price. But when Argentina, like El Salvador, goes to a full Bitcoin system, they will quote Bitcoin in US dollar terms. It is the strongest and most widely held currency in the world, and it will become stronger and more widely held because of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, correct me if I'm wrong, has been swinging in value left and right. Every random blue moon, I would see a report that Bitcoin has lost X amount of value or that it's gained X amount. How is it stable if it's swinging back and forth in the way that it's being reported?
So if you look at the charts and if you look at historics, that volatility, that swing, has been diminishing and diminishing. Okay, and it will get over time to a point where it has fully been compressed. We're not there yet, and that's why we won't see what I'm talking about in terms of the adoption of it tomorrow. Because to your point, we do need to see that stability, that lack of volatility, for people to say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and put my trust in this. We're getting closer to that point. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. If it happened overnight, to the contrary, I would argue it is not real. It can't happen overnight. There's an evolutionary process that has to happen.
Why the volatility? Like, why does Bitcoin swing in the way that it does currently? As you said, at some point it's going to get compressed where it's okay. This is where the value is. This is we have allocated a certain amount of value as a collective to this product. But why are the swings back and forth? Is it just it's a new product, and because it's a new product, they're trying to figure out okay, where does it actually fit in regards to its value? What's going on with this?
That's exactly right. Let me say it a different way, right? Right now, gold largely is a safe haven asset. I am arguing that Bitcoin will become a safe haven asset. Until it becomes a safe haven asset, and there's no threshold that it crosses that everybody agrees it's a safe haven, but at a certain point, everybody or the majority of people will say, oh, it is now a safe haven asset. Until that point it is reached, though, the alternative is that it's a speculative asset. And so it is largely in the speculative asset category, although less and less as each day goes by. But for now, it is majority, at least. I can't tell you down to percentages because this is not an exact science, but largely is a speculative asset. And because it's a speculative asset, we're speculating. I'm speculating. I'm speculating that the US government's going to buy more Bitcoin. I'm speculating that there are other governments around the world that are going to go ahead and buy Bitcoin. This is all speculation and yet to come. And so therefore, because of that speculation, a lot of the price is built upon that speculation. Every time we get a piece of news out there that goes ahead and bumps down the likelihood of that speculation, the price moves, right? So this week,
Right.
We're getting into tariff wars with all the people we know. Well, if we're getting into tariff wars with them, what's the likelihood that they're going to go ahead and do the same things as we do?
Yeah.
So therefore, the speculative community lost a bunch, this week. But again, on the long term, I firmly believe that that's the direction we're going in.
Two more questions. Trump is also invested in crypto, which people have pointed to and saying, wait a minute, this looks very dubious that the president is putting the US government into crypto while simultaneously also being an investor himself. Do you take issue with this? I mean, what's your take on this?
If I were president, I wouldn't do it. I think it's important for any civil servant to really have a disinterested profile vis-a-vis everything that that person is doing.
Agreed.
But that's not our president. Our president bought a Tesla on the front lawn of the White House yesterday.
Right.
So,
By the way, the audience may not
expected.
know that. There was a bunch of Teslas that Trump effectively, he bought one on
bought
the White
one.
House lawn. Yeah.
He bought a red one.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
buy a GM. He didn't buy a Ford. He didn't buy a Jeep or a Chrysler. He bought a Tesla. So, it is. It's what we've got.
It is what it is. Fair enough. Where do you think this goes ultimately? I think you seem bullish on this. And I think you're probably right about being bullish on it, considering the US government has just invested a huge stake into it. But where do you think this ultimately goes? I know you're saying various governments. El Salvador apparently is taking on crypto as their main currency. Many of these other countries that are weak in their currency. I mean, for God's sake, Ecuador, when I was in Ecuador, they effectively used dollars. I could effectively use dollars to go from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And so maybe these countries that have these currencies, where they tend to use other currencies as opposed to their own, they may get into it. You don't see a problem with this, though? It means that they're not sovereign currencies. The United States, we're $36 trillion in debt. So, but we make our own dollars. And other countries, if Britain makes pounds, for example, okay, well, Britain is a sovereign currency. The euro.
We have a euro. We have a euro.
Right.
We took out a bunch of local currencies with the euro, right? It's a regional currency. So yeah, I hear you in terms of there being one world currency. Maybe that's a problem, right? But my assumption is we don't get to a singular currency system. We will have a number of dominating. I don't think, China is ever giving up their yuan. There's no way, right?
But by the way, they've invested into crypto also.
Yes. They've done they've gone a different way on crypto. Their government issues the crypto. Right. And that, for me, as someone who holds, our freedoms, pretty near and dear, I don't like that.
And this is the point of crypto.
It's a little bit too much information for anybody to have about where I'm spending every single dollar of mine, especially a partisan group like the people that are controlling government at that time.
Right.
But in terms of where we go, I tell your viewers to go ahead and watch out for the United States, the states within the United States. We've got 19 states that have a bill inside of their Congress at some point in the cycle, either it's already past one house or it's being teed up, to go ahead and approve Bitcoin for being put on the balance sheet of states. To me, that's an even more powerful force than the United States government. I mean, the United States government is going to make, front page news, but states is very important because for them, it's less about currency and it's more about investment, right? They don't print their own currency. They use the United States dollar.
Right.
But it's about investment for the state. They have money in lots of different things through their pension funds that they have to go ahead and, manage on behalf of their employees and their retirees, right? Pension funds of the United States, of the states of the United States, are some of the largest investors in the world, right? The California pension system is enormous. And so if they start to put Bitcoin and crypto assets as part of their investment world and portfolio, to me, that's a much more important exercise because we've got pension funds around the world, like the largest ones in the world now, own in some way Bitcoin, like the Norwegian pension fund or the Japanese pension fund, right? The country's pension fund. Own that being an asset that people are going to own, just like gold. By the way, I'm not diminishing from gold at this point. Just make the allocation equal to gold, frankly, in these places, whether it be 1, 2, 3% of all the assets. That to me is incredible.
Wow. David, fantastic breakdown. Honestly, fantastic breakdown. I'm fascinated by this. It's like digital gold in a weird way, where it's, I guess for me, it's ephemeral. And because it's ephemeral, I don't know, I'm old.
Jamal,
I'm old. That's all. I'm
Jamal,
old.
we all buy things on the internet, right?
That's true.
We don't think twice. We press buy, we put in our credit card information, and lo and behold, 2 or 3 days later, if you're Amazon Prime, same day, it shows up at your door. We don't think too hard about it, right? It took a long time for people that only went to stores before the advent of commerce on the internet to get used to that exercise. But now there's nobody on the planet that doesn't go through that exercise. The same evolution is happening in the case of value. As a matter of fact, I'd argue with respect to the value, it's a one-way exercise, right? You have to have trust when you buy something that you're going to send money and something's coming back to you. It's a two-way street. There's a lot of activity that needs to happen. When you buy Bitcoin, it's just one thing. You don't have to, there's no round trip of commerce. There's no counterparty. There's no credit card information. There's none of that stuff. I think it's a static asset as opposed to whatever you're buying in that box that comes to your door with a smile on it.
David Tawil, thank you for this, man. I deeply appreciate you explaining this to the audience and explaining it to me. I'm fascinated by this.
You got it.
Frank, with you. David Tawil, he's co-founder of Plunging Capital, a multi-strategy crypto asset fund covering the entire ecosystem of the burgeoning asset class. He has deep experience in crypto assets, token mining, venture capital, programming, and asset management. David has managed a hedge fund for more than 10 years and has earned a JD degree from the University of Michigan Law School. Thank you for this, David. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Jamal. Have a great day.
You too. Have a good one.